Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two musicians who used to play in a band together and share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. If you haven't seen the movie we're talking about, then don't worry. The first half of the episode will be pretty high level and spoiler free, and then we'll play a warning before we start talking about any major plot twists in the ending. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. I actually saw this movie in theaters last fall, but it wasn't in theaters very long, and it took a while to come to streaming, and I've been so anxious to talk to you about it.
Really?
Like, I didn't like this movie as much as The Witch, but it affected me in a similar way where I walked away from it kind of confused and mad, and it, like, stuck in my head for a long time, and so I'm glad that now we can talk about it.
Yeah, I definitely understand that for sure. The connection to Witch, 100%.
Also, I value your opinion.
Oh, I value your opinion.
Oh, man.
We should just end this podcast.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's only going to be downhill from here.
I know. Yeah, it's over with.
All
Let's just move somewhere that accepts us.
Yep. And we could argue about any number of things.
Myrtle Beach, North Carolina. South Carolina. Where's Myrtle Beach?
South. I refuse.
Myrtle Beach, Carolina.
I'm going to Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
We're already fighting. All right, let's start this.
Let's do this. Let's be professional about this.
In 2018, Amazon Studios released the movie Suspiria, which was based on a 1977 Italian film of the same name. The 2018 Suspiria was directed by Luca Guadagnino and stars Tilda Swinton and Dakota Johnson. The story revolves around a young woman who moves from America to Berlin to pursue a dance career at a prestigious academy during the Cold War. While there, she discovers many dark secrets about the academy and the larger spiritual world. Suspiria was made on a budget of $20 million, but only brought in about $7.5 million at the box office. It can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video.
That's very true. For $5.99.
I know, it's an expensive one, but they lost so Amazon much money at the box office, they had to try and make it back, I guess.
Yeah. But, yeah, it's the same price on Apple TV, too.
Yeah.
On iTunes, I guess you should say.
Yeah. So.
Not too bad.
Yeah.
So, did you know that the music score was by Radiohead?
Yeah, Tom York.
Did you know going into this?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw it in the opening credits the first time I saw it. That was something that I noticed.
Yeah.
And then when I saw it in the theater, and so I came into it knowing that this time, rewatching
Yeah.
it.
I mean, like, Radiohead's a band that I think I like and appreciate as I get older.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that.
Also, like, Tom York and Tilda Swinton, they're probably brother and sister. I'm just saying, get that out there. I'm pretty sure they're the same person.
Similar vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They look just alike. I mean, anyway. So this is actually their debut score for, I guess, a movie, which is crazy to think about because, like, so I have a buddy, another friend. I have two friends, you and this guy, and
I already don't like him, but go on.
But he majored in music at school, and so, like, if I ever get bored at work, we just start talking about, like, I just start asking him music questions, and usually about Radiohead, and he tries to explain it to me, and that guy is crazy. Like, his style of music that he's, like, it's insane. Like, the thought that he puts into it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know how you have some musicians that just naturally gifted.
Yeah.
Clarence James.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have guys who are just like Pink Floyd, that just, like, blows your mind because of it's, like, formulated almost. Like,
mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put this key, I don't know, this chord with this one. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but
well, it's like
regardless,
everything is very deliberate about what they're doing musically.
And so then you add that to the movie score. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So which I think you may have already mentioned, but this is the remake of a 1977 movie.
Yes.
The first of, well, if this was 70s, the first one was the first of 3 movies, right?
Yeah.
So maybe there's going to be 2 more, maybe not. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
Let's see. So here's another thing that I don't think ruins this movie, but Tilda Swinton, she plays Dr. Joseph Klemperer. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
He's actually credited as Lutz Ebersdorf.
Okay.
Ebersdorf?
Yeah.
Ebersdorf? Dorf? I can't say Dorf. Dirk.
I still have no idea what the director's name is.
Yeah. Guadalajara. Anyway, so it's credited. That's the actor that's credited to playing Joseph, Dr. Joseph.
The old,
however,
psychiatrist.
Yeah. However, it was really Tilda Swinton.
That's crazy.
Which makes sense because the doctor was definitely had that makeup look to him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, it just didn't look natural.
Yeah.
But that makes sense why. But I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Or interesting. So, and I think she also plays someone towards the very end of the movie that's heavily in makeup too.
Oh,
right.
Okay. I know exactly.
She's all over the place.
About. Yeah.
She did the soundtrack. She was the doctor.
Yeah. That Tom York.
Yeah. So then also, there's an ending scene at the end of the credit, or like what are they called? Is there a word for that? There's a scene at the end of the
scene.
Yeah. But I think there's like a couple different versions of it.
Okay.
I kind of want to ask you which one you got.
Okay. Well, I can tell you I didn't get any of them because I didn't realize it was there.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll kind of talk about it.
Okay. Cool. Post spoilers.
Yeah, and I was wondering if yours was different because it was on, maybe if you watched it on Amazon, because I did it on iTunes or what. But anyway, so the facts for this were, it was a little rough because yet again it was trying to find facts from the 1970s version, and I figured we would eventually watch that.
Yeah.
And I would probably repeat some of the facts, and then another kind of thing, another fact about this movie was, and I can't say this for sure, I haven't seen the original. Have you seen the original?
I have not.
Okay, so we haven't seen the original. However, I guess colors were real vibrant in the first movie, like used kind of for the mood and stuff.
Yeah.
And they specifically did the opposite for this movie to change, I guess, to kind of help the sinister feeling of the movie, which I thought was kind of interesting. Like something that they 100% used in the first movie was, flipped around, and so I thought that was relatively interesting. It probably would have been better if I had actually watched the first one and then talked about it, but
well, after we watch the first one, we can talk about it more.
We can verify that fact. Yeah. Anyway, those are the facts.
Cool. A lot of that was overlapping with stuff that I was going to talk about with like how the movie was made and everything, so that was a good introduction. We usually, after the fun facts, talk about what were the people who made the movie trying to do and how well did they do it. And this movie, like I said, I've had some time to think about it because I saw it last fall initially, but I really think to try and accurately describe this movie, there are 3 different layers that you need to understand. The first is that it's a period piece set in divided Berlin in 1977. And, just like you were talking about with the original one having the bright colors, this one I feel like really embraced kind of the feeling of that era. And so it was very muted, it was very gray, it was raining a lot, it was just kind of dark, and there weren't a lot of colors, and kind of everything that you would think about as like a mental association with that like very dark time for that city was really embraced visually by this movie. I mean, even the kind of the graffiti on the walls, it just had that urban decay type feel, and everything about like the setting and the background was like in support of that feeling.
Yeah, it was so much so that there's a scene where there's a crochet or like a blanket that I don't know if it's crocheted together, and it had colors on it, and like my eye just kept going to that because the whole room was kind of dull. Yeah, like everything else was kind of dull, but this one blanket had like a red and yellow, and I was just like, oh, wow. You know, it just so. I mean, it seemed so dull, not like, you know what I mean, color wise, and then you know just that little spark of color really popped out.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, even some of the stuff they added, like with the news reports in the background of stuff that would have been happening at that time, like the terrorism and the unrest and everything, and then the fact that the doctor had to go through like border control and stuff. Yeah. It really, a lot of times a movie has a setting, but this movie had a very specific setting and it stuck to it well, I thought.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, then the second layer of the movie is it's like a super indie art film. Like when we lived in Oklahoma, Sarah and I went to Circle Cinema in Tulsa a lot because she really likes the independent films, like more drama type stuff. And that's where they'd show smaller movies that didn't get into the bigger theaters. And I think that this one had exactly that vibe. But since Amazon Studios distributed it, it got wider exposure. So like overall, the movie was presented in that way, in that style. It just felt like much more of an independent film than like a Hollywood blockbuster on a lot of levels.
Yeah, I could definitely see that too. I think it, you know, I'm glad that Amazon did like put it out because otherwise, you know, who knows if, I mean, because I've seen the original title Suspiria, but I mean, I hadn't ever had an interest in watching, you know, I didn't, you know, wasn't something on my radar. So luckily with this one, and also like there was ads all over the place for it, like on IMDb and stuff. But anyway,
it kind of reminded me of Raw in that it's not one that you would think of normally as like a big distribution type thing. But
absolutely.
But then the third level is that it's a horror movie. It exists in the world where there's this like three mothers mythology that goes back to, you know, the original movies, but before that was from some short stories from a really long time ago. And that's like a really interesting Wikipedia rabbit trail if you ever want to go down it. Like the origin of where the larger like mythology of the world that this movie is set in came from.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't check any of that out.
Yeah, but it's a very much a supernatural horror movie with some super gruesome scenes. And so with those three things all coming together, it was a really weird combination of things that I'm not sure. Well, it was just a unique movie. We can talk more about it later. But
I agree. It was extremely unique, and almost a movie that I had to watch twice.
Yeah.
You know, just to, you know, which yet again we can get into, but it's just I almost had to watch it twice to kind of appreciate some other things. I don't know.
Yeah. But, it was a lot to take in one viewing, for sure. But yeah, and then like you said, so Tom York did the soundtrack, and I thought it was really perfect for the tone of the movie. I read that he was listening to a lot of krautrock as inspiration, but I really didn't hear a lot of that influence. I mean, to me, it was more just like Radiohead music and then kind of ambient horror movie music. But one thing I liked a lot about it, too, was how they used either silence or very minimal music in places that you wouldn't expect it. So, like, a lot of the times when there was a dancing scene, it was paired with either no music or, like, very minimal music that didn't, like, have a beat.
Or the lady, counting off.
Yeah, which just made it super creepy.
Yeah,
and, like, that's what they were trying to do.
Right.
And so I just thought that the sound that was added really built up what the movie was trying to accomplish, which was cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think. I couldn't agree more. I mean, like, even the song in the ending credits,
Mm-hmm.
which I couldn't tell you the name of offhand, but like it was just like after the whole intense second half of the movie, I was like, oh, this is a pretty song. I could just sit here and listen to this. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't anything,
Yeah.
overly done.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and then I thought the acting was pretty good for what it was supposed to be. Like I mentioned before, this movie was very much in the vein of an independent drama where
Mhm.
everyone's either like super numb and unemotional and disconnected or like really sarcastic and dark.
yeah,
And so I think the actors did a good job pulling that off, but it's a totally different thing is like if you enjoy that style. So I could see some people not liking it that much.
yeah, absolutely, I agree. I think it's yeah. I mean, I feel like with those movies, like either you like them or you don't. Like there wasn't too much middle room. Like,
Yeah.
and it's also depends on, for me, like my mood as well. Like,
Yeah.
sometimes not in the mood for movies like that where it's lack of emotion kind of thing. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. But then I guess like from a horror perspective or like what made it scary, the creepy dancing, first of all, played kind of a big role, and that was just really unsettling to watch. And the way that they presented that I thought was awesome. But there was also a decent amount of gore, and it reminded me of a couple other movies that we watched where a lot of it is sort of this slow unveiling of what's going on and like building up the suspense. But then it hits that point where it's like all of a sudden, hey, we're doing away with all of that. Everything that you've been led to be scared of in this movie is now real, and you're forced to confront it. And then it's just like, it's like you hit that high point on the roller coaster, and it's just been all of this build up and like anxiety, and then all of a sudden it hits and you're just along for the ride, and things are happening, and it's like all of your worst fears are coming true, and then it's just like that until the movie's over. And so I thought that was really interesting. Obviously we'll get into it more after the spoiler warning, but I think that at the end you kind of walked away completely horrified by the idea of witches and secret societies.
I agree. I think for me, like if I were to categorize this movie, it'd almost be like a mystery horror, supernatural film, I guess. Like when we initially started to watch this movie, we were only going to watch part of it and then pick it up the next day because we started kind of late.
Yeah.
And then like after that amount of time had gone by, we're like, well, let's continue. Let's keep going. Just a little bit more, and so it definitely keeps your interest, I guess, perked up.
Yeah.
But I will say this though, it's a super, super long movie.
It is.
Which, everyone knows pisses me off.
Yeah. It was a little long-winded for your taste.
Yeah. I'm sitting there thinking like, man, this is like a 7.5 episode of Mario and Luigi cartoon. Like I could watch 7 episodes of that cartoon in this amount of time. That's how I do all. Like I compare everything. Like I asked Katie, like, how long are we going to be at this event? And she's like 8.5 Mario and Luigi episodes, cartoon episodes.
So what is like your cutoff? Like when would you fake sick to get out of it? Would it be 10 over under?
No, my first thing I do is fake sick.
Oh, okay.
To get out of any event ever.
Yeah, any sort of socializing.
The second thing I do is pray to get sick. Like just, I don't want to lie to my wife. The third thing I do is try to break my leg. Because I feel like I can deal with that. I can't break the fingers. I need those for typing. Yeah,
fair. That's the moneymakers right there.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah. So, who do you think would like this movie? Or if someone asked you about it and they were considering watching it, what would you think are the important things to tell them?
Okay, so if you're a fan, who I would recommend this movie to, if you're a fan of Let the Right One In, The Witch or The Vitch, depending. Still got it. You'll absolutely like this movie. Or, I mean, you should like this movie.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it was relatively similar to The Witch, as far as like, you know how they did like the old English in The Witch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, this threw in, you know, the German and French.
Yeah.
You know, as well. So I mean, there was a lot similar. So if you like those two movies, then more than likely you'll like this one. Now I will say this too, wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of either one of those two movies.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed this one more than those two.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nah, that's not saying much.
Yeah. Not a
But
lot to compare it to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so to me, there was like some legit dark witch horror in this movie, and it was dark and gruesome and disturbing, but that was also intermixed in like this super indie art film, and I can see where the style of the movie wouldn't be appealing to everyone, and also just the gore and horror of the movie would be a little much for some people. So finding the right mix of people who would enjoy a movie that has both of those things, I think is a little difficult, and that's why it maybe didn't do so well at the box office. Mm-hmm. But as a fan of horror, it stood out to me as very unique. You know, much like It Follows or Raw or any of those movies that we've watched where we're just like, that is something that's going to stick in my memory that doesn't remind me of a bunch of other movies that are just like it. Mm-hmm. And is still scary. That's kind of where it landed for me.
Okay.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, cool. Let's play the spoiler warning and then get into the good stuff.
Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. If it's not obvious enough, warning, spoilers.
Alright, so I got my one love and my one hate about this movie. Which would you like to hear first?
I would like to hear your hate first.
Too bad, I'm going to do my love. I love that this movie introduced like a whole mythology, like that whole Three Mothers story. I've read a fair amount about it since I watched this, you know, including back like when I saw it originally, just because I thought it was really fascinating. And I'm really excited to go back and watch the original trilogy now and to learn more about it, just because it felt like it created a very expandable horror world that I think is interesting, that it has like its own history, and it hinted at a lot of things that I would like to know more about. So I thought that the story was very engaging, and it created a lot of questions that made me interested, not angry that it didn't answer them. So I feel like that's like kind of a fine line to walk, like we talked about with Us. But yeah, I am excited to learn more about the world in which this movie was set.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
What did you love?
So I think for me, it was, I compare, I don't have a lot of experience watching witch horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's only one I can remember of, and that's called The Witch.
I thought you were going to say Hocus Pocus.
The second one's Hocus Pocus. My wife makes me watch it every year. Wink, wink.
Yeah.
No. So I think for me, I was definitely happy and cool with the fact that it wasn't like there was action in this movie.
Yeah.
It wasn't just suspense and then you figured out why there was suspense and it was over with, which I honestly kind of felt like that was the case with The Witch. Now, that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just honest. So, you know, the fact that it was unraveling the story as it went on, and then it was just like kind of straight action.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah. I definitely, you know, I think that was what I appreciated the most. Now, I'm going to let this roll into my negative because it also ties into that. Okay. And then I'll let you do yours if that's okay. So, this kind of goes into my negative. So, if it's okay with you, I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to ask your permission because I don't care. So, Only we'll know why that's funny.
Oh, typical Myrtle Beach attitude.
Anyway, so the movie was definitely long.
Yes.
And it's not like it does keep your attention the whole time. I mean, it's definitely interesting, and I feel like it peaks, but it also has some lows too.
Yeah.
There were also no jump scares, which I'm adding that to a positive. But it almost just kind of seems like okay, they're able to investigate the dungeon or whatever area, but so they're investigating, it's creepy and stuff, but then they're out, and the witches supposedly don't know, and I don't know, it just almost sometimes it seemed like it was just too easy, like things were too easy, and there a little bit of suspense, but not nearly as much as like if someone were like to kind of come in and they would have to hide and things like that. But I think my biggest negative is just it took too long, and there were some times where you had to piece the story together, which was a little too confusing, I guess. Like trying to, like, it would cut back on the main actress's mom and say like, she's my greatest sin. And it's like, okay, so now you're holding on to that piece in your head while it's continuing for another hour, and then you figure out why. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's my biggest negative.
Yeah, mine was basically the same thing. Like, it was so long, and it really didn't feel long for probably the first, I don't know, half of the movie. Yeah. Like, it felt like it was building in a good way. But I just feel like they tried to do too much in one movie. And like, especially because at the end there were still a lot of things that remained unanswered, so it wasn't like they introduced a bunch of stuff and then tied it all up and that's why it was long. There was just a ton of stuff in the movie, and I think I would have made it like an hour and 45 minutes and cut some of the stuff that didn't go anywhere, or just saved some of that to use in like other movies in the trilogy if they're gonna do that. Right. So yeah, to me, there was a lot of really, really good stuff and a lot of really like cool tie-ins and things, and I like that the way that they built the setting and kind of reinforced like the stuff going on in the background, and like it really felt like the movie was in divided Berlin, but there was also a lot of stuff added that didn't really add to any elements of the story. It was just kind of like the feel of the movie, I thought, and that made it go on longer than it needed to. So yeah, I agree. But anyway, all that said, so you mentioned that there weren't really like a lot of jump scares, but there were, I thought, just really good scenes that were sort of sprinkled through that kept you engaged. And the first one that really got my attention, and the one that made Sarah put down her phone when we were watching it originally, is when Susie is dancing with the class for the first time, and Olga is in the mirror room. And it's like, as Susie is dancing, she's getting like thrown around and twisted, and you're realizing that there is some sort of link between the dancing that the people are doing in that academy and the supernatural. And so you don't really have any sort of explanation or frame of reference for any of it, but that is like a introductory scene to everything else that's going to go down in the movie. Was super powerful and disgusting and disturbing, and I think it makes everybody who's watching the movie almost like hold their breath in anticipation, right? Because you have no idea where it's going to go after that. Yeah, I agree. We actually, so like I was saying earlier, we were going to watch it so far and then pick up the next day because we started late, and we got to that point. That was the point where we were like, oh, okay, let's figure out what's going on here a little bit more. Now, I think for me, like, there were, like, right before she had walked out, right before Olga had walked out, she called them witches. Yes. And then that stuff happened, and so I was like, oh, okay, that's what we're dealing with, because I didn't know anything about this movie going in at all. Yeah. And so I think it was like, oh, cool, that's, that has to be what's going on here. So, but you still don't know, like, it's not nearly in depth at all at that point. And so that was definitely a good scene to,
it definitely got our attention.
Yeah.
Both of us.
One thing too, kind of along those lines, like you said, rewatching it, you picked up on some stuff, or I guess you said when she said it was witches, then you kind of knew that's what was going on. When I watched the movie again right before doing this podcast, I caught a ton of stuff that I didn't, realize had any significance at all the first time. So, like, especially the things that the girl is saying, Patricia is saying to the psychologist or psychiatrist in the beginning, and then things that he sees in her notebook, and then a lot of the images that are in, even a lot of the things that were in Susie's dreams, like those, like, super quick, disturbing flashes. A lot of that played into other things in the story, either that was to come later. Because, like, you saw Marcos in one of her early dreams before you had ever seen her on the screen, and some stuff like that. So a lot of the stuff that kind of felt random to me the first time I watched the movie, I realized was very deliberate going back through it. So I like that it was tipping its hand a little bit in a way that you didn't appreciate the first time you saw it.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of times with movies, I get frustrated, and I know I've talked about where it's like, where like the twist is like, well, yeah, of course it's going to feel like a twist because you've been pushing us in the other direction for the past hour, and now you put this, I mean, like, it's almost cheap. The twist for this one did not feel that way for me. Like, everything leading up to this, you didn't. I don't personally think had really gave you a clue. I think, kind of looking back on it now, you might think like, well, like, why did this random girl from Ohio show up? It's just. But up until like the first time watching it, when you get to the point with the twist, it's like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, that's crazy. So I think they did pretty good. With that.
And then also, I guess the other main scene I wanted to talk about before we get into the ending, because that's crazy, was when the old man he goes like to his weekend house or whatever it was. Yeah. And then he sees his wife has come back, who he lost like in the war. And then it's like this happy reunion between them, and they're really old, but they're so happy to be back together, and they're like walking and talking. And then all of a sudden he stops and looks up and realizes that as they've been walking, they're back at the academy. Yep. And he's confused, and then she's gone, and it's just the witches, and they like drag him inside. That was one of those, like, you just feel your stomach sink. Yeah. Just that feeling of dread, because it was built to be such this like happy reunion, and he's been kind of a character that you feel sorry for. Yep. And then something good finally happens to him, and then you realize that the witches were just using like his deepest, most painful feelings against him. And it was just like, oh. And then everything that comes after that, obviously it doesn't get better for him. Right. And so I really liked that for me was like that point where the roller coaster started going back downhill, and it was just built and built and built, and that was such an effective transition for me in the movie to kind of the way that it went into the ending. I thought that was really, really awesome. Yeah, I mean, that scene too, I mean, there's a lot of emotion involved because you realize that what's going on there, and so it's taking you like it literally changed for the most part. Now, not everyone's gonna be this way, but for the most part, like when you watch that scene, like you're happy that he finally got to be with his long lost love, and like it's snowing, it's kind of perfect scene, just it all works together. But the thing I think I like most about that scene is when the witches, not that, I mean, it's like, okay, yeah, if they could go on and live happily ever after, that would have been great. However, when the witches came out and they kind of do like the scream kind of thing, and then they're going back, kind of dragging him, and they're laughing like the witch from Wizard of Oz. It's like they're tying it together. I was like, hell yeah, like I'm cool with that. But anyway, like that scene was just, you talk about like a roller coaster of emotion right there. Like you're like, oh, I will say this with the movie too, the scene where the girls get messed up in the dancing room. Yes.
That's crazy. That's also where my wife started paying attention as well.
Yeah.
Like that right there. So that caught the attention. And then you have the old man scene. But in between that, like there were a couple scenes here and there, but not nearly as memorable as those two until you get to the end, obviously. But I mean, I would say like, I'm gonna go with those as my favorite scenes as well. However, I'm gonna say that there was a lot that weren't my favorite scenes that were kind of boring. Mm-hmm. I just want to get that out there.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff.
I don't want to paint the picture that this is like the perfect movie of all time. Yeah, but there were some scenes I don't know if I've ever seen. Maybe. But like the emotions that you go to from the beginning of the Doctor seeing his long lost love to like the ending, that kind of almost starts it, is crazy. Like, just throws you for a curveball. Yeah.
So I'm going to try and summarize the ending at a very, very high level, but there's so much there. So basically, after he comes back and is like captured by the witches, then Susie has now like established this mental connection with Madame Blanc, who is sort of in charge of the school, that's played by Tilda Swinton. And you realize that there's some sort of ceremony being prepared for Madame Marcos, who is like claiming to be Mother Suspiria, which is one of these three like mother witches in this like larger mythology of the movie. And there's some sort of ceremony that is going to like let her take over Susie's body or something. Right. And they've bewitched several other girls. And so Susie is coming into this other room, and I don't know if it's like the basement or what part of the academy that you hadn't seen before. And she discovers that all of the matrons are there, and Madame Marcos you finally get to see, who is this old like disgusting woman who almost looks like she's melting. Like she kind of looked like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles bad guy. And then the Doctor is like naked on the floor watching as there's this like dance ritual going on, and the three girls that, including Sarah, that have been like hypnotized or whatever, are there, and they're like cutting them open. Mm-hmm. And they're doing like starting this ritual, and there's like all this sound and movement and dance and stuff. And then it's like Susie seems to have like accepted her fate, that she's just going to be part of all this. And then Madame Blanc tries to stop it, or to say like, no, we should stop and think about this. And then Marcos just kills Blanc, like cuts her throat. Yeah. So then all of a sudden, though, you realize that Susie isn't there to let Madame Marcos take her over. She is instead the actual Mother Suspiriorum, and she has come here to annihilate everyone who has been worshipping the wrong one, because Madame Marcos is not the real Mother Suspiriorum. Yeah. And so she summons this demon that just destroys everyone in like extremely gruesome fashion, like exploding heads. I mean, everything's like so much blood, and it's all filmed in like this weird kind of reddish tint, and it's super dark. And then she goes up and he kills everyone that voted for Mother Marcos instead of Mother Blanc earlier. Yeah. Or Madame Blanc. And so then the three girls who had been students that were like being used as part of this ritual, Susie goes up to each of them and like grants them a painless death. And then the psychiatrist is allowed to get away, and everything kind of goes back to normal. But then it ends with Susie going back to him, and he's like in bed, he's like been traumatized, and she does something to wipe his memories away of all of it, and then she just disappears, and that's the end of the movie. But the part with like the demon and everything going on in that scene, like the music, the color of it, the way that it was presented, the visual effects, it went on for a really long time, and it was so uncomfortable and disturbing. Like that is like 20 minutes of cinema that will probably stick with me forever. Like in a very similar way to the end of The Witch, when Black Phillip talks for the first time, where it just makes your skin crawl. Like everything in the movie, I feel like, prepared you to be deeply affected by that scene, and then that's exactly what it did.
Yeah, it was definitely successful. So it was, what was it, Mother Marcos? Is that
Yes.
the? So that was also played by that same actor.
Yeah, that's who I figured.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if this was before or after she canceled Christmas in Narnia, but we can find that out in another movie probably.
Yeah. So the ending's super crazy. So I think who she summons is actual death. I think that's who that was, and that's just after reading. I just thought I'd put that out there. I didn't know at the time. It's the scene. I think it's almost like chaos that's going on. I mean, like you said, there's just that uncomfortable feeling. And I think part of it's because you have like all the reds happening. Yeah. You have like the ritualistic dancing is still going on when death is going around and killing each of these people.
Yeah.
Each of these ladies. You have like the doctor kind of screaming on the ground naked going on. I mean, there's just so many things that's like uncomfortable in that situation that's happening. It's like it's very, very successful. Like you said, like the movie has this whole kind of dread leading up to it, and then it gets to that part, and it's like, oh Jesus, it almost makes you feel a little queasy.
Yeah,
of what's going on. You have like a lady standing there who's kind of been gutted. Anyway, you have her standing there, and
it's like it spends 2 hours making you scared of something that you don't quite know how to think about.
Yeah.
And then it shows you that thing you've been scared of the whole time. Like that, in an effective way. So,
yeah, I think so. There's also like, as you're watching that scene and you're realizing what's going on, you kind of think back to like when all the witches are sitting at a table at the restaurant or bar or whatever. And all of a sudden, Susie, she decides to sit at the end of the table.
Yes.
And like right across from
Madame Blanc.
And so the ending kind of definitely sums up everything. It definitely kind of pieces it together, which I was definitely cool and appreciated. Yeah. I think though that Susie at the end, it's crazy because like, okay, she's technically a witch. Witches are theoretically bad, right? I don't know anything about them, but she at least gives the doctor that little sense of like peace, knowing what happened to her, but then just took it right back when it's just like, you could have just like let him
remember that
like
part?
Took everything else away, but just let him think, but anyway, so at least for that moment he had the sense of like he knew what happened to her. So
and that's one thing that I think made it extra interesting was that you definitely don't see her as a purely evil being. Like, it seemed like she was there to dole out justice in whatever world of morality exists in this world of this movie. And she, kind of set those girls that were being used, at least gave them like a painless death. Right. And then kind of took away his traumatic memories of that whole thing. So it was almost like she was putting things back in order more so than just like mindlessly killing, which you've seen that she can be super powerful and destructive, but not in a undirected way, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it wasn't like a monster movie where you just have this thing that's set on killing everybody. There was a lot more to it, which I think made it more interesting.
Kind of restores it's also, like we kind of talked about earlier, it's, the first of 3 movies.
Yeah.
So, maybe that is one of the reasons why as well. So, I mean, and I haven't seen any of the original 3 at all, but.
Yeah, but I want to now. So.
Yeah, so I think it was the actress who plays Susie in the original did you read that?
Yeah, I read that she had a cameo. I didn't catch which character it was though.
It was the doctor's love. What was her name? Anka?
Oh, his ex-wife or his wife, I guess, that died.
Yeah. That was who played the. She had a cameo in that. So
nice.
That was nice of them.
Yeah,
I think her name was Jessica Harper.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Anyway, I think I think for me personally, if they had screwed up anything with the ending, my feelings towards this movie would be a whole lot different.
Yeah.
But they just kind of pulled it off in a way that like throughout the whole movie, you do have that, not sense of dread, but just an uncomfortable feeling, I guess. Like you're trying to, like you said, the dances are uncomfortable. You know, the dialogue, it switches from English to like German to French, and like, I don't know, it's just kind of going on. But then it, you know, with the ending, it gets super, super crazy. I do have a question though.
Okay.
Was the original, so the dance that was taking place when the girl broke her shin, was that initially going to be the ritual that transformed, like that switched bodies, or what was the purpose of that? Because that's what I thought that dance was for. I thought that was going to be, but it was like, then at the end it was like, no, it had to be this whole ritual, and there had, I guess it had to have been, because they were talking about witnesses. Yeah,
I think it was like priming the pump, maybe.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like that was the first step, is like getting that collective energy to, I don't know, but that's speculation.
It was kind of, it was a little confusing for me at that point. Maybe it was just like, okay, well, we need to, you know, have this. And then the other question is, what was the purpose? What was the reasoning behind that lady stabbing herself at dinner in the neck? Did she know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have an answer other than it may have just been because she saw like the conflict and the division and knew what was coming. And like after seeing, you know, obviously something went wrong when they tried to use Patricia in the way that they ended up using Susie. And maybe it was regret over that, or I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. I was just kind of curious about, I mean, that was definitely another part that took your attention, because like it was just like a whole bunch of witches having dinner, and then just stab right at the throat. But anyway,
so what was your ending scene that you were talking about, like the post-credit thing?
So I think, so there's a couple of them to my understanding. So at the end of the movie, a woman can be seen walking out. So I didn't get this one. I did not get this, but I read that it was on multiple. And so, anyway, at the end of the film, a woman can be seen walking out of a garden of Klemper's former estate. So Klemper is the doctor. Holding a book titled The Great Mother. The Great Mother, the full title of the book, I guess, or whatever, is The Great Mother, an Analysis of an Archetype. Anyway, so the book supposedly explores the Great Mother as a primordial. I don't know what that is. Image of human psyche. It also describes how the feminine can be depicted as a goddess or a monster. I don't know. She's walking out with a book, and they think that is possibly a nod to the next movie of what's coming out, like so like the next witch, I guess. The ending that we got, though, and it wasn't so bad because the music was good leading up to it. Shout out to my boy Tilda. Ours was just, it cut to Susie in kind of the dance area, and she looks off, like she's kind of smiling off, like she's looking at someone or something. She smiles, and then it ends. Like it was, and they
just like in the studio.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, and so they suspect that that's she's seeing the next witch, I guess. Gotcha. I don't know. It's just, there's a lot of and then I think there's one more, but I don't have that confirmed. I just kind of saw a little blurb about it. So, but I was wondering if it was like different for Amazon to iTunes, or how that worked. But
that's interesting. So, cool. So I got one more thing to say about this movie.
Oh yeah.
I don't think I've told you about it because I didn't want to spoil anything for you. But so I went and saw this movie with Leo, last fall, and we both kind of walked out of it like, what just happened? Because seeing that closing sequence in a theater was overwhelming.
Yeah.
But then I came
uncomfortable,
home.
I would imagine.
Yes, very, very much so. So then I came home, and the next night, I wasn't feeling super great before I went to bed. And then I woke up at like 2 a.m. and was really sick. And that was the start of that really like bad stomach virus that I had. But I also had a really high fever. And so before bed, I was reading the Wikipedia page about this movie and about like the three mothers and all of the stuff, like the mythology of that. And then from like 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., I was laying in the guest bed, like super sick, throwing up and everything. But I was like fever dreaming about the movie.
Oh.
And for some reason in my head, there was like a different mother for every hour. And there was like a clock. And it was like as the clock was changing, I was having to like put my arms a certain way, like in a choreographed way.
Whoa.
Because of something like to do with like the dancing and all of that, or else I was going to be a victim like at the end of that movie. Like, it sounds stupid saying it now, but it was so real and so intense in my like high fever ridden brain at the time that it was like I still get kind of uncomfortable thinking about it.
Right.
And it was, oh my God, like it was such a weird
crazy
experience to have. And now that's always like part of my memory for this movie, which makes it even like creepier.
From 3 to 6 a.m., 3 hours. Listen, are you a witch? You have to tell me if you're a witch or not. It's like the cops.
No, I'm not a witch, but it was.
If you are, I'm down to join. I mean, just like, you know.
It was in the haunted guest room, though. The one where the lights turn on and off and everything.
Gosh.
So, anyway.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy, though, man.
Yeah, that was a weird experience. Yeah. That was one where, like, the next day it took me a while to, like, get everything sorted out in my head.
Right.
So
now, this is the last thing I have to say on this whole podcast. You and Leo go to a lot of the horror movies together, and I love Leo. Only met him once, and he's a nice guy. But Leo, if you're listening to this, don't get too close to him. You understand me? It's not too far away, and I'll swing on you, Leo. Not really, Leo. I like you. But don't get too close to him. I'm being serious.
Oh, yeah.
He's my friend first. We've been friends our entire lives.
Yeah.
You worm your way in watching horror movies with. I'm catching on to you, Leo.
Well,
here's how big of a dick I am. I'm trying to pick a fight with the nicest guy in the world.
Yes.
That's how big of a jerk I am.
Yeah. I feel like, meanwhile, Russell is like finally out of the crosshairs.
He's never out of crosshairs. I just send him. I send him letters, threatening letters, but I don't sign them. You know what I mean?
That doesn't surprise me in the least.
That's not true. That's not true.
Oh man.
Overall, since I'm editing this podcast, I can go crazy.
That's true.
Overall, I do have to say that this wasn't my favorite movie that we've done, but it was better than I expected. Like leading into it was definitely better. And as far as it being a long movie, it was frustrating because, you know, at points it was just kind of like, okay, you know, let's get to it.
Just kind of dragging.
But then it would do something that would get your attention and make sense and kind of go with it. So yeah. I was pleasantly surprised with this movie, and it does like right to the point where you're about to like pull up your phone to read something about the movie, or you know, just to, you know, like I try to do that with facts or like read about them, especially if I'm watching it multiple times. But right when I was about to do that, something would happen, and you know, I would continue watching it. So
yep. Yeah, this was definitely I felt like a pretty unique horror movie experience, and there were some things that you may or may not like about it, but you have to admit it was different. So
yeah. Yep.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com. or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.